If this is your first time listening to our podcast, welcome. Our programming brings a diversity of voices connected to Myanmar to share their perspectives, thoughts, and reflections about what has been happening there since the military coup. All of our guests share one thing in common: a deep personal stake in the ongoing crisis. And it's an honor for us to be able to bring their voices into your earbuds. But however difficult it may be to hear some of their stories, we hope that you'll come away with a deeper and more nuanced understanding of what is happening there.
And welcome back to another episode on our ongoing coverage of the earthquake in Myanmar and its after effects. Today, we will be talking about an often overlooked community in Myanmar, one that has suffered disproportionately and very significantly. I'm talking, of course, of the Muslim community. My guest today, Htuu, thank you very much for joining us and bringing your expertise to the table. I want to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself directly to our audience before we begin.
I'm Htuu Lou Rae, a founder and coordinator of Doye, a coalition of activists and organizations led by Burmese people from Burma and the Burmese diaspora. Okay.
Mm. Excellent. And specifically, we're going to be looking at the Muslim community. So we know, for example, that the earthquake has devastated much of Myanmar, but what I think a lot of people are not connecting the dots on is that the earthquake itself happened on a Friday, and this Friday was a highly specific Friday, a highly significant Friday, sorry, for the Muslims. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
First of all, let me clarify that I'm not a Muslim. I'm a person from mostly Buddhist background, um, and I've been in touch with the Muslim community, and well, I have more data than most activists and journalists who are covering and providing aid to the people affected by earthquakes because of the nature of my work. So last Friday was the last day of the last week of Ramadan, and the last week of Ramadan, so specifically the last 10 days of Ramadan, is the holiest 10 days of Ramadan, which happens to be the holiest month of the year for Muslims. And the prayer on Friday, the Jummah, is the holiest of the prayer of any specific week. So the prayer on last Friday was the Muslim equivalent of you know the 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 mass on the Christmas Eve. So even if for someone who's not so religious, I mean, it, I mean, you would see that person in a mosque performing the Jummah on the last Friday of Ramadan. So mosques all over the world, not only Burma, were packed with mosque goers, and uh, Burma was no exception. And that coincided with the time of the first earthquake, which was 7.7 um, in magnitude, and that that's not, and also that's not the only reason why the death toll and the casualty among the Burmese Muslim community is disproportionately high. The other reason is successive regimes. I'm talking about not only the military regime. I'm also highlighting, the overthrown Aung San Suu Kyi's NLD government denied the Burmese Muslim community from, performing routine maintenance and repair on these places of worship, which many of which are centuries old. So, what is supposed to be routinely maintained and looked after, um, these historic sites were gradually turned into death traps. And the result is the tragedy that we all experienced on last Friday.
Mm. And so I wanna focus on that a little bit. So obviously, this is just a really bad coincidence that the earthquake hits at the time that you would see the largest concentration of worshippers in the mosques. But you're saying that then the mosques as buildings themselves were disproportionately more likely to collapse and to trap the people inside because mosques in particular have been targeted and denied repair. So they haven't necessarily been directly attacked by the government and physically damaged by the government, but for decades they've been denied the opportunity to make these buildings safe. And I assume, although I don't know, but I would assume that there are a lot of earthquake prevention steps that would be available today for buildings that were not available at the time that they were originally constructed, which mosques have not been able to benefit from. Is that a fair summary?
Um, I would say, any repair and maintenance in general, not only that, and I would like to add that, making buildings earthquake proof is not a very common practice in Burma. Um, and because, Burma is not a stranger to earthquakes, but earthquakes of this magnitude is once in a century affair. Um, and so buildings. I'm not an engineer or civil engineer or structural engineer of any sort. Um, but based on my understanding, there's no government or private body overseeing, you know, the building code and to ensure if if there's any structural improvement uh, 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 or safeguards um, to make a building earthquake proof or even safe for living, because if you've been to Burma, um, there's quite visible signs of poor built quality, even visible to non-engineers and non-experts. And people would just move into a building and live just like that. And as long as it's standing and it feels all right, if someone can move in, that seems to does the job. And then there's a lot of incentive for contractors and construction companies to skimp on the non-visible quality of a building, the structural quality of the building, because everything that you save um, can be added to your profit, and these companies are mostly profit driven, and there's no body or government, nonprofit or private, overseeing such practices and preventing such practices from taking place.
Mm, okay, that's important context. But then, so let's look at after the earthquake. So the earthquake hits. We have a lot of these mosques being damaged, collapsing, trapping people inside. With the rescue efforts, would you say that there was a how should I put this? Less of a likelihood that rescue efforts would focus on people trapped in mosques because these are Muslim religious buildings, or is there no discrimination within the rescue efforts?
Um, let's not talk about the junta-led rescue efforts. So, so I just read an article on Global New Light of Myanmar that Myanmar Online contacted the Prime Minister of Pakistan, um, requesting aid from Pakistan, and then he received a positive response. And he also tried to clarify some information, reported by um, local media such as Irrawaddy. Um, he tried to correct the number of the death toll from the Muslim community, um, try to reduce the number. And at the same time, he also mentioned that the junta rescue teams are addressing the the the, the victims trapped underneath the buildings, rescuing, carrying out the rescues. So at the same time, I've I've been seeing reports from civil society organizations and also from the media that no rescue junta-led rescue team has given any assistance to to people trapped under mosques and Muslim places of worship. So I wouldn't believe, like, I mean, Global New Light of Myanmar is essentially the junta's propaganda tool. So I would go with the information that I received from the civil society and the local media on this. I think the Muslim community has been bypassed by the junta in its rescue efforts.
And I mean that's not surprising considering the history of the military and the relationship they have with the Muslims. But rescue efforts are very complex, as I understand right now. There is no central organization of rescue efforts. There's a lot of local community groups, CSOs working on this. A lot of people volunteering to work in rescue efforts. Does this discrimination also pervade non-military rescue efforts, to your knowledge?
I would say there's a possibility because I mean, since before the earthquake, the Burmese Muslim community has been facing structural discrimination, which not only originates from the state, but also from the society at large. Um, uh, for example, so I saw some comments under a news report reporting the damage of the places of worship in Mandalay, and the death toll and injuries from such damage. And I see some um, individuals from the far right posting questions, insensitive comments such as where is Allah? How come Allah didn't protect you, and so on. And this anger, many Muslim, and that includes uh, people in my social circles. And so this is, I would say, this is a form of communicative violence. And there's also, attempts to rent houses and properties in Htuu Lou Rae by some members of Muslim community in Mandalay, and they were denied. Um, and us, I mean, the owners of the houses ask if they're Muslim, and reply that they wouldn't let them rent the houses if they're Muslims, and and such things are less common after the coup, and especially now, but still um, they still exist. Such occurrences, and this incidents has been made public now because they've been shared online, and of course the, the 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 persons who experience these kind of situations are anonymous, and then but you would see the difference is that you would see there's so much anger from the general population, from everybody, not only members of the Burmese Muslim community at such insensitive treatment. And then you would also see these individuals from the far right communities being ganged up on the social media version of a mob being put into their place. And then normally you would see back and forth arguments from like about two or three people with these individuals, and it would peter out. And there's more individuals getting involved now. So this is some kind of um, so there's a tragedy going on, multi-layered humanitarian crisis, And at the same time, there's a silver lining in the sense that the community is, being more tightly knit, and then people are, you know, some kind of people are coming together to and becoming a more tightly knit community based on this the shared trauma and experience of hardship and evidence-based faith in um, the community to codependently overcome these adversary and challenges. And I see some kind of a you know renewed sense of cosmopolitan Burmese national identity coming emerging from these ruins and despair. Um, if there's a silver lining, that's it.
I mean, that's definitely a positive message that we needed to hear. But unfortunately, the difficulties do not end with what we've discussed thus far. And I want to ask, while this is happening, and you're talking a lot about the online community and attitudes that are changing in the virtual realm, those are very important. But what I think we've seen in many places is that even if you have a lot of positivity in cyberspace, that doesn't necessarily translate to tangible positive action in the real world. And so the question I have to ask is the situation now for the survivors of the earthquake on the ground. Many of these people, obviously, regardless of religion, they're going to need food, they're going to need shelter, drinkable water, medical care, and so on. What is the situation, Muslim or not? But what currently is the situation for people trying to get these essentials to survive in the coming months? And is there discrimination in the likelihood of receiving this type of assistance?
I would say there definitely is discrimination in the junta-led efforts, and I can rule out, we can rule out uh, that it, the possible discrimination in the civil society-led efforts either. And the best way to overcome this is to ensure that a percentage of aid and necessary materials, life-saving materials, are handed over to Muslim-led civil society organizations, and ensure that these organizations are fully stocked at all times. So that's one way to that's a fail-safe in case there's any form of discrimination among the civil society-led efforts.
Mm, interesting. And on the international side of it, because as you say, Global New Light of Myanmar is not exactly a reliable source. It is a military mouthpiece. But the fact that they would announce that Min Aung Hlaing reached out to the government of Pakistan, that's that is interesting. Why do you think that is? Because it makes it appear as though the military wants to seem favorable towards the Muslims, and Global New Light of Myanmar is targeted towards the military's own supporter base. So why do you think this is going on? Do you think Min Aung Hlaing actually did reach out to Pakistan, and if so, why?
I think I believe the junta is using Burmese Muslim population as a bait to acquire resources for its own benefit for Nebido. And it's like they believe. I think the junta believes it's it's easier. It's going to be easier for them to appeal to majority Muslim, the government of a majority Muslim country such as Pakistan, um, if it could present to such countries as a government which doesn't discriminate, or are or as a government which also looks after its Muslim population as its general population. But I doubt any of the aid received, either from Pakistan or from any other sources, would ever reach the Muslim population. Um, if even if it does, it's going to, the population is going to be the lowest among the priorities of the Naypyidaw, with the Naypyidaw, the junta's power center being number one priority.
I mean, that's very insidious, but I mean, it's not something that the military has not done in the past. But this idea that they would simply essentially it's almost like holding someone hostage and then convincing Muslim countries not to give aid to local CSOs and NGOs that actually would be able to help those communities, but try to get those governments to give aid directly to Naypyidaw just for the military to then steal all of that aid, which again sounds cartoonish, but these are things that the military has done and has been consistently doing for many years, and is well reported on. So it's I think it's an important message to put out there to anyone in the international community who's looking to send aid to Myanmar, to make sure that that aid is being sent through channels that are verifiable and that can be held accountable. And military controlled channels are neither of those two things, unfortunately.
Exactly. And this a similar form of systematic discrimination has been carried out against the population based in the rebel controlled areas, such as areas in Zagai.
Mm.
So the same caution and practices could also be applied to ensure that population in those areas also have access to aid.
Yes. Yes, I mean, this is definitely a message that we want to emphasize. That I know the National Unity Government is trying to emphasize, that you don't necessarily have to partner with the NUG, but you do have to make sure that the money that you're sending and the food and the medicine and the shelter and the clothes and the blankets and so on is actually going to make it to the communities you're trying to send it to. Basic oversight and accountability measures that would be in place with any relief effort, and partnering with the military led government is not going to achieve that outcome. Unfortunately, that is the simple fact of the matter. And look, again, on the topic of the military, because they just keep managing to find ways to make life worse for everyone. Um, looking through the comments that you've made in the past, uh, this is not something I think that we've covered in discussion yet on our channel, but I understand people who have volunteered themselves to try and assist in these relief efforts. People who are not working with NGOs or not working with CSOs, they just have two hands and two legs and a strong back, and they want to help people out of the rubble. They are being taken by the military, and they are being forced into military service. Um, this is something that we've heard rumors of. Is this something that you can speak to?
Yes, I've heard of such reports from multiple sources, and there were attempts of rescues by various individuals, and they happen to be activists or dissidents that were on some kind of a list by the and have been on the lookout by the junta, and then because of these humanitarian efforts, they were identified, spotted, and were arrested and taken hostage, or were forced to fight in the front lines. Yes, I've also heard such reports.
I mean, this seems ridiculous. Like, it seems insane. So I just want to clarify: are you saying that the only people who were taken in this manner were known activists, or have you also heard of just anyone being targeted by the military for forced recruitment?
I've heard of young people between 18 and 35 who are not activists, um, who were identified and spotted and um, captured for captured for conscription, um, but not just any other person. But I've heard of a group of rescue team in Zakai, fully equipped, um, set to carry out a rescue mission from rescue a trapped person from underneath a collapsed building with the permission of the homeowner. And a group of vigilantes, few sortie, junta aligned vigilantes arrived and started harassing the team, um, started asking questions, and then they called the police and and soldiers, and they arrived and asked if they have any permits. So the team asked, okay, we are we can apply for a permit. What's the procedure? And the conversation became heated, so the team decided to leave. Whoever that was trapped in the building that could have been rescued and survived, maybe now dead because of this interference. So I've heard of such interferences. I've heard of such interferences, but no arrest, uh, but no arrest of any other person, random person who is attempting to rescue a victim, unless they're between 18 and 35 or an activist.
Yes. I just want to clarify for the viewers who may not remember them, but the Pew Sortie are they are not a joke. They have carried out assassinations in the post-coup period. They are known for their acts of violence and their pathological loyalty to the military. So being harassed by the Pew Sortie is not something that you can easily ignore. Because that could turn very violent. These people are known for that sort of behavior, unfortunately. It's quite disturbing, though. That is very disturbing. Would you have any concept of why? Like, what is the motivation of the Pew Sortie in interrupting a rescue effort of a person? Presumably, the Pew Sortie were from that region. Like the person who was trapped could have been a member of their community. Do we have any idea why they would want to interrupt in this way?
So whoever that reported, all of these people have to remain anonymous. It was a team member who was reporting this on social media. So they they cited the reason as to ensure um, the rescue team was not aligned with any resistant force.
Okay.
So there could be some concerns that resistance forces could be disguised as rescue teams, infiltrate the junta controlled area. That seems to be their concern.
But you said this was up in Sagaing?
Yes, in the guy.
I thought the majority of Sagaing was outside of the control of the military currently.
But apparently there were soldiers
Okay.
and the police and Busorti.
Yeah.
So
I mean, this is why would hang on, I just want to why were the soldiers not already involved in rescue efforts? That seems like an obvious question.
I well I believe in rescuing anyone trapped in the debris or any earthquake victim is not the junta's priority, really. Since the bombings and artillery attacks still continued, and this is all any effort shown by the junta in the media is just a front to procure essentially resources to rebuild Naypyidaw, to to help Naypyidaw survive the earthquake, and then whichever that's left could be resold on the black market or reappropriated, and I think that's their motive and agenda. I mean, what interest would serve what interest would serve the junta? What purpose would it serve for the junta to aid in any rescue effort? It's only going to divert their attention and resources from the war, which is their number one priority, which is their focus until now. Even though the Three Brothers Alliance and NUG has declared a ceasefire.
Yes. And a ceasefire, we should point out that the military have chosen not to accept and not to participate in.
Correct.
Um, in fact, have continued bombing campaigns in affected areas, um, which is a level of cruelty that is difficult to comprehend, I think. Um, and so, turning to the future, then, what is the prognosis in your view, based on what you're hearing from the ground? Because it is sounding at this point like this is one of those very typical cases of a disaster that is bad, that has been made unimaginably worse by the interference of the government, of the military. um, People are dying in buildings who could otherwise already have been rescued. People are dying in medical centers who otherwise could have received adequate medical care. People are likely going to die in the coming months from disease, from exposure, from starvation, from contaminated water, who otherwise can be saved. What do you think is likely to be happening to these communities, and what do you think can be done internationally to alleviate the suffering?
I've been asked, I've had a few interviews before this podcast. I've been asked, how does it feel, to experience all of this from here, from abroad? And I said, I feel like I'm the narrator, a side character narrating uh, a horror fantasy co-written by H.P. Lovecraft and George Orwell, um, with elements of totalitarianism and like incomprehensible, overwhelming sense of terror, uncertainty, and dread. Um, the only difference is this is real, and there's something we can do about this. Um, but it all depends on on will of it all depends if the international community has the will and incentive to assist the vulnerable populations, um, because we already like we kind of have the roadmap on what to do, and which parties to work with, and what are being needed. And all you have to do is contact a few of the nonprofits. Well, we're kind of random and disorganized right now, and that is something that we could focus our attention and energies on, to form some kind of a coordination, organization, coordination, to form some kind of a um, uh, to form some kind of a body which could coordinate these rescue efforts, such as conducting rapid assessment. Because right now, since Burma is there's no state, a functioning state in Burma, it's a multi jurisdictional um, um, territory. So there's no coordinated state-led effort in any of these rescue activities. So an NUG cannot really, you know, fill this role. So we need a body which could coordinate all of these rescue efforts, and that is something that could take shape in days and weeks to come. And so it's something that the international community um, could could oversee as it takes shape, and assist in assist in bringing together, and at the same time um, the community can reach out to the local um, rebel-led or civil society or private rescue efforts, and instead of the junta, and do what we can before something like this comes into shape.
Absolutely. I'm grateful for your insights. I'm very conscious of your time. I know that you have to go to another appointment after this. It's a very busy time for all of us. But before you go, we always have a tradition on our episodes to invite the guests to finish the episode by sharing any direct message, whatever that may be, whether it's something you think the audience needs to know, or just a message of hope that you want to deliver, or just an insight or a personal opinion. If there is anything that you would like to just directly say to our audience, I'd like to give you the floor to do that.
Okay, how about I say this is more practical. I'm not an expert on US federal government, but what are the chances that the US government can throw in the frozen $1 billion to the $2 million that it has already pledged for the earthquake victims? I mean, it can be managed by the USAID. And USAID is it's a body that I would, trust better than NUG, because NUG is, if you ask me, is a civil society organization pretending to be a government, and is slowly losing support from the public that has, elected some of its officials. And USAID is more transparent, has a track record of being reliable, impactful. So I asked the public, doesn't that make more sense? And isn't also going to at the same time help the country recover from this multi-layered humanitarian crisis?
We're glad to have had you with us for this episode of Insight Myanmar podcast. You might know that beyond sharing stories and conversations on this platform, we also carry out humanitarian projects through our nonprofit mission, Better Burma. As we all know, the challenges these days are vast, but so too are the opportunities to provide meaningful support. Your contributions go towards supporting critical initiatives, such as providing food, medical supplies, and basic necessities to internally displaced persons in conflict zones. You can help to fund healthcare services that save lives and bring dignity to those in need. Your generosity also supports education efforts for children, helps mobile medical clinics, and provides care packages to political prisoners, just to name a few of the many programs we sponsor. You can support these impactful efforts and directly contribute to our projects, which uplift and empower those most affected by the crisis in Myanmar. Visit betterburma.org/donation to join in this effort.
What about Yarananga Unyana, Daduya, Danabio, Ganizadamana, we got a Besayana, Besayo. Oba Yarananda, Dayananga, Yaranaya, Dayanam, Boda, Yaranam.